Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, vino en el cielo y en la estrellería, y ídolo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham vino. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. La mujer de tierra ordenada, día ella preguntaba, ¿qué tiene la cara tan demonada? Ella ya sabía el bien que tenía. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Al fin los 9 meses pari quería, iba caminando por campos en viñas, y a su marido no le descubría, topó una mara y parería. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. I am Hakham Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov, and we have, as always, a packed study ahead for you. We're going to be finishing off the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah, and doing chapter 14, and we are going to be continuing in Leviticus chapter 26, which is we're very close to the end of Leviticus. Afterwards, we'll go into Numbers, I believe. Maybe we'll go backwards to something else, but I think we're going to go into Numbers. And so we have a good study ahead today. Hope you'll enjoy it. So first of all, let me, as always, do a sound check. If you can hear me correctly, then please type in a 1 or type in a Y in the comments so I know everybody can hear me and everybody can see me. Should be. I'm checking my internet connection and it looks pretty good, but that definitely helps if I get some confirmation from the other side. So I'll start off with an interesting story today. So as you know, okay, very good. As you know, I'm part of a community, a rabbinical community here. They're kind of a very open community, Shabbat Shalom, and but they have they definitely have their limits. And today it was very interesting and almost, I would say, comical. The rabbi of the community gave a talk, during the Kiddush, when you eat after the long, boring prayer service. I usually just spend the prayer service just reading various books I'm going through a fascinating book right now on biblical Hebrew, very technical, but very, very interesting to someone who's into that, as I am. If you're into that and you want to know the name of the book, just text me privately and I will let you know, but just be warned, it is extremely, extremely detailed and technical. At any rate, or I'm usually reading the Tanakh or doing something that I find of more interest, except for the time when they read the Torah aloud, then that's when I'm paying attention. At any rate, at the Kiddush, at the meal after the prayer service, the rabbi, who usually gives pretty long, boring, meaningless talks, gave a somewhat shorter but boring talk, except the main point of his talk was it was a polemic against the Karaitism, and it was clearly directed towards me. It's well known in the community that I'm a Karaite. It's well known in the community that I don't accept the oral law, quote unquote, the fake oral law. It shouldn't even be called the oral law. As I always say, calling it the oral law is already feeding into rabbinical propaganda. Because why do the rabbis, and it's the later rabbis, why do they call it the oral law? Because they want to say that it was passed down orally from the time of Moses. That's not true at all. It should really better be called the rabbinical, the Pharisaic and or rabbinical interpretations of the Torah. And even in secular scholarly circles, the rabbis of the Mishnah, of the Talmud, are usually referred to as the rabbinical sages or the Hachamim. They should never be referred to as that. They should always be called just the Pharisees or the rabbis or the rabbinical leaders. We should never give them the honor of calling them the sages or the Chachamim, because they were none of the above. In fact, what they were distorters of the text of the Torah. So, any rate, so the rabbi gave this talk, and the basic idea of his talk was the same drivel that anyone who's been in rabbinical synagogues has heard before when they're talking about the oral law. That basically, to sum it up, it was that because of the oral law, we have tradition that's passed down. We, meaning the rabbinical Jews that he was addressing, have tradition that's passed down from generation to generation. Therefore, we don't go astray. And if you don't have this tradition, you're just using your own ego to interpret the Torah, and everyone would come up with their own interpretation, and it would be a complete free-for-all and complete chaos. Well, that's not exactly true. So let's set the record straight. So first of all, there's complete chaos and a complete free-for-all within the rabbinical world. If you have ever been part of the rabbinical world, you know there are so many differences of opinion, even if you go back to the time of the Mishnah, if you go back to the time of the Talmud, but even in modern times, there are so many different sects of rabbinical Judaism, subsects, differences in opinion, differences in ideas, differences in practice. In Israel, there are certain main groups, such as the Karaite or the ultra-Orthodox, and then the Dati Leumi, or the religious Zionist group, and they're very different from each other. They really have a lot of differences between each other. So let's not have any illusions that there's any kind of consistency or there's any kind of unity within the religious world here in Israel or really around the world at all. Secondly, what we can say is that it's actually not true that people who interpret the Torah, people who interpret the Tanakh, according to the Pshat, according to the straightforward understanding, as we Karaites do, it's not true that it's free-for-all. In fact, because the Torah and because the Tanakh are so consistent, and because the text in it is so clear, the fact of the matter is that most people who interpret the Torah and the Tanakh in such a way will come up with understandings and interpretations that are remarkably similar to each other. Will there be some differences? Of course, there will be some differences, but the basic direction to anyone who's knowledgeable in Torah and Tanakh is going to be the same. And in fact, because we're all basing ourselves on the same text, the text of the Torah and the text of the Tanakh, and we don't have this plethora of books, this endless amount of books, which a lot of times contradict themselves. A lot of times there are different opinions within the books. They're not a consistent set of books, and there's not consistency in any one of those books. So in fact, those who eliminate those books, I'm talking about the Mishnah, the Talmud, the later writings of the rabbis, actually are going to get a lot more consistency and a lot more unity in their understandings of the text of the Torah and the Tanakh. And I've seen this within the Karaite world. Are there differences among Karaites? Of course. Karaites are very independent thinkers, and they have their own ideas, and this is a good thing. So there are certain basic differences, but I would say overall, I find that there's a lot of consistency, and I would go so far as to say there's actually more consistency among people who take a pshat view of the text of the Torah than those who don't, such as the rabbinical Jews. So at any rate, there's a very interesting little speech that the guy that he did give, and everyone knew exactly what it was directed at or who it was directed at. It was directed at me. Maybe some of the people in the congregation thought that I would take the opportunity to respond or walk out or get angry or something like that, and I did nothing of the sort. I just sometimes you just have to let fools speak, because people are not stupid at the end of the day. They realize deep down what the truth is. And so I just stood there quietly. I stood there stoically, as I generally do in situations like this, because I don't need to answer a fool. Certainly not on his level, not on his playing field, not on his time, and not as he would maybe expect or hope. I can answer in my own way, in my own time, say what I have to say, when I have to say it, how I have to say it. And I actually thought the whole thing was kind of amusing. And I actually thought it was great. I was very happy that the rabbi brought this up, because I know that if he has to bring this up in his Shabbat talk in front of the congregation, that means people are talking about charism. That means people are thinking about charism. That means that people are considering charism and considering what I have to say to them, and not just me, what people who are taking the Peshat view of the Torah, they're considering what we have to say, because if this weren't the case, this particular rabbi never would have mentioned the issue at all. It would have not been considered an issue. It would have not been considered something even worthy of talking about. The fact that he decided to talk about it, that he had to talk about it in a certain sense, shows that he considers Karaism, or the Karaite point of view, or the Peshat-only point of view, or as I like to call our movement, the Chozrim b'Tanach, the return to Tanakh movement. Anyone who lives in Israel and knows modern Hebrew knows that the phrase Chozrim b'Tanach is a very loaded phrase. There's another similar phrase called Chozrim b'Teshuvah. And if you live in Israel, you know the meaning of a phrase such as Chozrim b'Teshuvah, and so therefore you get the idea of what I'm trying to say with Chozrim b'Tanach. So the Chozrim b'Tanach movement is clearly, the word is getting out, and it's considered a threat, or else the rabbi would not have had to make this little canned speech, which is just, again, regurgitating the rabbinical party line that because there is a chain of tradition going back all the way to Moses, that this is the real deal, and that anyone who doesn't have a so-called chain of oral tradition going back to Moses is lost in the woods, when in fact we know the opposite is true. This so-called rabbinical chain of tradition, of transmission, doesn't go back anywhere near Moses. It was, I would say, invented, if you want to use that word. It was developed really in the mid-Second Temple period. It was developed under the influence of foreign nations which had taken over Israel, so specifically the Hellenist Greeks, and then the Romans that were in control of Israel at the time, or it was developed outside of the land of Israel later on in Babylon, in the two yeshivas of the two great quote-unquote Babylonian rabbinical yeshivas in Iraq. And so its chain of tradition does not go back anywhere near Moses. And this is always proven. Whenever you speak to a rabbinical Jew, they'll always say the same thing. I think I mentioned this last week, or if not, I'm sure I've mentioned it before. They'll always say, our tradition goes back 2,000 years. That's what they always say, 2,000 years. That's the number they use, 2,000 years. Well, let's examine that number a little bit. As I've mentioned before, if you go back 2,000 years ago, that lands you right around the year 0. So besides the birth of the Christian idol named Jesus or Yeshua or whatever you want to call him, what was going on at the time of that, at that time in period of Jewish history, was that Israel was occupied. The land of Israel was occupied by the Romans. Israel was essentially a Roman colony, a Roman protectorate. It had a Roman client king named Herod ruling over Israel. The Romans had taken over from the Hellenists from the Hasmoneans in 63 BCE. The Hasmoneans had freed Israel from the Hellenists in approximately 165 BCE. So at this point, Israel was a Roman colony. If you go back 2,000 years, and was heavily influenced by, as I mentioned, Hellenistic culture, Roman culture, and even foreign religions such as Zoroastrianism, Persian Zoroastrianism, and other surrounding pagan cultures. And it's in this atmosphere that the rabbis began developing and popularizing their religion, which became known as Judaism. So this is their 2,000-year chain of tradition, or chain of transmission. It brings us right back, without going into great historical detail, it brings us right back to Roman time. Excuse me, Roman times, or if we want to go back a bit further, excuse me, to Greek Hellenistic times. And even when Israel was a free state, the so-called second independent state of Israel under the Hasmonean dynasty from approximately 165 BCE until approximately 65 BCE, so for about 100 years, still it was heavily influenced by these foreign cultures. Israelis or Jews at that point, we can call them Jews by them, did not speak Hebrew. They were speaking mostly Aramaic and some Greek. They were heavily influenced by these surrounding cultures, Greek culture, as I mentioned, Roman culture, Persian, and formerly Babylonian culture. And this is the religion, or this is the atmosphere in which the rabbis came up with their new religion, which was a departure from true Torah, a departure from Tanakh, and not a continuation of an unbroken chain of transmission, as the rabbis would like to claim. So you'll never hear, so the next time you hear a rabbinical Jew talk, watch out for that number, 2,000 years. That's what they always like to say. They'll never say 3,000 years. Well, if we go back in history, then there are many different proposed dates for when the Torah was given, when the Ten Commandments was given, when the time of the Exodus from Egypt was, and the 40 years of wandering in the desert. But the most common date that's given is around the year 1250 BCE. So we're talking about 3,250 years ago, approximately. But you'll never hear the rabbis say we have an unbroken chain of tradition that stretches back 3,250 years or 3,000 years. They'll always say we have an unbroken chain of tradition that stretches back 2,000 years. It's as if they subconsciously know that their chain of tradition doesn't stretch back 3,000 or 3,250 years. They know deep down that their religion was invented, developed, if you want to say it in a less, in a more neutral way, but we'll just go with invented, that their religion was invented approximately 2,000 years ago, a little bit more than 2,000 years ago, but in that general region of time. I was watching a lecture the other day. It's in Hebrew, so unfortunately, unless you know Hebrew, then there'd be no point in my sharing the link. If you do, or if you are fluent in Hebrew and you want me to share the link, then you can contact me privately. It's by a very, very good lecturer named Yoel bin Nun. I recommend looking him up. I don't know if he has some stuff in English, but all of the stuff I've watched so far of his are in Hebrew. And the name of the lecture was, "Did the Rabbis Invent a New Religion?" And he goes into detail in a sense and essentially proves what we already know, that yes, the rabbis invented a new religion. They don't have a chain of tradition that stretches back to Moses, nowhere near it. And that's why they have to come up with this lie, this phrase, the oral law, because it's actually the phrase that a snake oil salesman uses. And I've said this many times before, but I'll say it again. If you were to go to some house and, I don't know, some house somewhere in, I don't know, Hollywood or something like that, and purchase it, then maybe you'd pay, I don't know, let's say $1 million for it, right? But if you found out that Brad Pitt or whoever, lived there, now you might pay $10 million for it, right? The idea of taking something and relating it to something that has authority or has fame is the oldest trick in the book to sell it to the masses, or to give it more value to the masses. So the rabbis invented their religion, as we said, according to this lecture Yoel bin Nun. The rabbis invented a new religion, okay? And they did it about 2,000 years ago. And in order to sell the idea that it goes back to Moses, all the way back to the time of Moses, 3,000 plus years ago, what they need to do is sell the idea that it goes back to Moses, or else no one's going to buy it, right? It's going to be worth, forget $1 million, it's going to be worth $10 instead of $10 million, right? No one's going to buy the snake oil that they're selling. So what did they do? They came up later on, and it's the later rabbis who started using the phrase the oral law. But the phrase is designed to do a very specific thing, and that's designed to explain how this religion, which is really only 2,000 years ago old, and is a departure from true Torah, and is a departure from Tanakh, it's designed to explain, to lie to the people, and sell the people the idea that it goes all the way back to the time of Moses. And why do they need to say oral law? Well, the answer is very simple, because there is no written record of it before approximately 200 BCE. All of the main elements of rabbinical Judaism don't have any record, not in the archaeological record, not in the historical record, not in the textual record, anywhere of existing before approximately 200 BCE. In other words, 2,000 years ago. Okay? So what do they need to do? They need to bring it back another 1,250 years ago. But there's no written record. How do they account for that? How do they say that, or how do they try to sell to the people that it wasn't invented in 200 BCE, that it was actually invented 1,000 years prior in 1,250 BCE, again, give or take? They have to say that it was, since when there's no written record of it, they have to say that it was passed down orally. That's the explanation, right? That's why there's no written record of it, because it was passed down orally. That is a lie. That is the snake oil of a snake oil salesman. And that is exactly what the rabbis do. They sell this lie to the people because the facts prove otherwise, because the written record, the archaeological record, the historical record shows that there was no rabbinical Judaism, no elements of rabbinical Judaism before the Hellenistic period, before approximately 200 BCE. So they have to say that it was passed down orally, since there's no written record of it. Okay, the first main document of the rabbis is the Mishnah, which was written down in approximately 200 CE, so 200 after 200 of the Common Era, and that's their first main document. And even now, according to this lecturer that I mentioned, he even believes it was later, but let's go with the standard date of 200 CE. This is the first written record of the rabbinical interpretations, or the first extant full written record of the rabbinical understandings and interpretations of the Torah, and that is about 2,000 years ago. That's the first time that they're putting down their ideas in a standard written form. Okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and let's say that that these ideas had gathered some momentum in the years prior to when it was written down. Let's even say the centuries prior to when it was written down. Again, actual historical record shows that it began to emerge about a couple hundred years earlier, and then it was first codified in written form in the Mishnah in 200 CE. But even so, what we have here is the first official written record of it not being written down until 200 CE, and that is just a gathering of the ideas that may have been floating around, and not even necessarily orally. Maybe there were other written manuscripts or other written texts that were put together to form the Mishnah. At any rate, the whole idea is that this religion, this departure from true Torah, this new religion that the rabbis invented, was not around until about 2,000 years ago. And that's why you're always going to hear rabbis say our tradition stretches back 2,000 years, even though Moses lived 3,000 and beyond 3,250 years ago. And this is why you're always going to hear them talk about an oral law, because they don't have any written record of their law before approximately 200 CE. So I think it's great. I hope this rabbi and other rabbis start giving speeches like this during the synagogue service, during the Kiddush. I love it. It gets people talking about Karaism. It gets people asking questions about Karaism. I hope more people will ask questions about Karaism. I hope more people will. I hope more people will look into it. Even if they're looking into it to try to disprove it, that's great. It's almost like when people started prophesying in the camp, and Moses says, "Are you jealous for me that people prophesying in the camp? I wish that all of Israel were prophets." I wish the same thing. I hope that all people are look into Karaism, and all people start reading the Tanakh, so that each person could learn and realize on their own the truth of what the true religion, quote unquote, I don't like to use that word, but we'll use the word, the true religion of Israel is the true Torah and the true Tanakh, and not this rabbinical distortion that was invented by the rabbis based on the influence of Greek, Roman, and Zoroastrian culture around 2,000 years ago. So please, rabbi of this congregation, rabbi of other congregations, please start talking more about how your oral law is the truth, because you know it's not deep down, and the people who are listening to you know it's not deep down. Everyone who's in a cult, everyone who's addicted to a drug, knows deep down that they're in a cult, or knows deep down that they're addicted to some kind of drug, and they know that the truth is, or they know deep down what the truth is, and they have a deep feeling of when they're not engaged in the truth, that fact that they're not engaged in the truth. And some people can never break out of that cult, just like some drug addicts can never break out of their addiction to drugs, and will end up, dying, with with a needle in their arm in the gutter. So it'll be the same with this cult of rabbinical Judaism. Some will never break out of it, but some will. And the fact that people are talking about it, and the fact that rabbis are talking about it, that rabbis are including these ideas, trying to disprove them in their sermons, while everyone's stuffing their face with, gefilte fish and herring and God knows what else, potato kugel. I think that this is a great thing, and I'm very happy about it. So when I heard the rabbi today doing this, as I mentioned, just stood there kind of quietly with a kind of smile on my face in the corner, and said to myself, great, I hope this happens and continues to happen. So we all know the truth. That's why we're here. We all know that the rabbis distorted the Torah. And in fact, another thing I always like to say to rabbis is when you talk about your 2,000-year-old Torah, when you talk about your 2,000-year-old religion. So again, I mentioned that the Mishnah was written in approximately 200 CE, which is actually about 150 years later than the Christian synoptic gospels according to many scholars, were written. So I always like to point out, well, your religion is actually Christianity. The main sources of Christianity are actually older than your first main written source. So you might as well go ahead and just go become Christians or something like that. Since, if you think your religion is old, then you might as well find an older religion and go become Christians. They're already half Christians anyway. So that's pretty much what I have to say for today. Those are my thoughts. We all know what the truth is. We all know that there are three derivative religions of Torah. As I always like to say, there's Christianity, there's Islam, and there's rabbinical Judaism. And as a good friend of mine always says, so just as Jesus is to the Christians, so is Muhammad to the Muslims, and so is the Talmud to the rabbinical Jews, right? These are different cults, and all three of them have their false prophets. All three of them have their false books. And actually, and this usually shocks people, but I've mentioned it many times before, so if you're not shocked already, you'll be shocked now. Of those three religions, Christianity, Islam, and rabbinical Judaism, the one that I actually think is closest to the Torah is actually Islam, believe it or not. And I'm not talking about the radical form of Islam where they're chopping off heads and chopping off hands. I'm talking about the more mild form of Islam that I saw in places when I spent a lot of time in Morocco, when I spent some time in Tunisia. That's the form of Islam that I'm talking about. And I actually think of those three religions that Islam is actually closest to the original intention of the Torah. Christianity is, of course, completely out to lunch with the worship of a foreign god, and I'm talking about standard Christianity, and Messianic Christianity with the belief that Jesus was a Messiah also is completely out to lunch. And rabbinical Judaism is just some bizarre derivative religion of Torah. But these are all derivative religions of Torah. None of them are Torah. None of them are true Torah. And if we focus again on rabbinical Judaism, then we see that due to this departure from true Torah, 2,000 years ago, 2,000 plus years ago, the nation of Israel has done nothing but suffered for the past 2,000 years ago in our rebelliousness, in our rebellion against Yahweh and the word of Yahweh as expressed through the Torah and as confirmed by the books of the Tanakh. And now we've come back to the land of Israel. Yahweh is giving us another chance. Yahweh has brought us back close to him. He's returned us, those of us who he's been kind enough to bring back to the land of Israel. And it is now time not to make the same mistakes, to throw off the sins of our fathers, as we'll talk about in Leviticus chapter 26. It says so explicitly there. It is time to reject and repent of the sins of our fathers and to return to Yahweh and to return to his true Torah. And the throwing off of rabbinical Judaism by the nation of Israel is part and parcel. It's key to doing this. And until the nation completely throws off and discards this scourge, this 2,000-year-old scourge, this 2,000-year-old derivative religion, this 2,000-year-old deviant religion, this 2,000-year-old lie of rabbinical Judaism, then there will just continue to be problems for the Jewish people. There will be continue to be problems here in the land of Israel, including wars, terrorist attacks, economic problems, hatred of us by the other nations, and so on and so forth. So I pray, and I'm very happy to say that actually most of the nation of Israel has already rejected rabbinical Judaism. Only about 10% of the entire Jewish people worldwide are what we can call practicing rabbinical Jews. The rest have some affiliation with rabbinical Judaism because it's the main game in town, or anywhere from some to none. But the fact of the matter is that the nation, 90% of the nation, long ago decided that they want absolutely nothing to do with the rabbis. They want absolutely nothing to do with rabbinical Judaism. So things are looking good. There are these just 10% holdouts that, because of the history of our nation, the history of our people, still wield a lot of influence over the people of Israel. But each year their influence is waning. And I see the light at the end of the tunnel, where this scourge known as rabbinical Judaism will be completely eradicated from the people of Israel in the near future, and that we, the people of Israel, will return to the true Torah, the pshat understanding of the Torah as was kept 3,000 years ago, our 3,000-year-old unbroken chain of transmission, chain of tradition, and not as a Hellenistic / Roman / Zoroastrian derivative religion invented by the rabbis 2,000 years ago. So they can take their 2,000-year-old chain and shove that chain right up there, what? And I will stick with my 3,000-year-old chain of tradition as expressed by the written Torah and as confirmed by the rest of the books in the Tanakh. So those are my thoughts for today, and hope you enjoyed it. We'll take a brief break, and then we're going to dig into the final chapter of the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah, which is chapter 14. So see you guys back in just a couple of minutes. Once again, this is Hakham, Melech, Rahmiel ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and this is our weekly Torah study. Put some music on, and I'll see you guys back in about 5 minutes.
Abraham Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, vino en el cielo y en la estrellería, y el dolo santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham había. Abraham
Día ella preguntaba, ¿qué tiene la cara tan demonada? Ella ya sabía, el diente tenía.
Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Al fin los 9 meses Karaite iba caminando por campos en viñas y a su marido no le descubría, topó una mara y parería. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham vino, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel.
Okay, everybody, we are back. Once again, welcome to the study. This is the World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. I am Hakham Melech Rahmiel ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. A couple of quick announcements. So if you are interested in learning Torah and or Biblical Hebrew on a private basis, I do offer these classes, Biblical Hebrew classes and Torah classes. I also offer what I call biblical-based life coaching. So you can contact me about that. I still do have some openings left, although it is filling up very quickly. So if you're interested in learning either Biblical Hebrew or Torah or doing biblical-based life coaching, biblical life coaching, then you can contact me privately and we can talk about that. Other than that, if you're not already part of the World Alliance of Qara'im WhatsApp group, the announcements, then if you look at the description where you saw the study advertised, you will see a link to the World Alliance of Qara'im announcements group. Anyone is welcome to join that group on WhatsApp and get announcements from the World Alliance of Qara'im. If you want to join the World Alliance of Qara'im, then this is one of the main ways we raise money for our many projects. And we have some extremely, extremely important projects that we'd like to, and that we are already beginning to put into effect. So we already have a local group that's meeting here, a local World Alliance of Qara'im group that's meeting in the Golan Heights in Israel, where I live. We do a weekly Torah study, and we have weekly meetings. And we have many other plans. We want to start a learning center. We eventually want to start schools. We want to put out literature, including a weekly sheet that would go around the country, a parsha sheet as they call it, and many other plans that we have. And so if you'd like to support us by joining the World Alliance of Qara'im, there are also many benefits to you. You get a lot more access to the resources of the World Alliance of Qara'im. It's only fair. Right, we have limited resources, so it's fair. What is going on? Seems to have frozen. Let me just hold on 1 second. Let me see what's going on here. 1 second, please. Just give me a second, please. I don't understand what's going on here. I have to close this one down. Yep, that's what's giving us problems. Let me close that down. Just 1 second, please. Okay, I think that should make things much better. 1 second, please. Nope, we seem to be frozen. Okay. I think hopefully that solved the problem. Just give me 1 second here. Let me just check something. I think one of the live streams was causing some problems. So once again, please let me know if ever you have problems seeing or hearing me, then please let me know. It's very important. And a lot of you have my WhatsApp. Yeah, we're good. And a lot of you have my WhatsApp number. So if for whatever reason it doesn't work on screen, then you can text me on WhatsApp and let me know if for some reason the screen completely freezes or something like that. I think we should be okay now. At any rate, okay, good, Isaiah 43, thank you. At any rate, as I said, if you'd like to join the WAC, then we ask for a very small monthly charge. I always say it's about half the price of a typical cell phone service in the United States, and that will give you a lot more access to resources, including to myself. I try to interact as much as possible with the members of the WAC, and again, it's only fair because I have limited time and limited resources, as any human being does. So it's only fair that I focus on those who are paying members of the community. So there's a link up here. You can see it on the upper left. Join the WAC. So please consider doing that if you haven't already done it. And also, if you'd like to donate, if you tithe or if you give a portion of your salary to charity, and I'll put up a different QR code. There's a QR code. It's also in the description. That when you saw the advertisement or saw the announcement for the study, then all of these links are also in the description there. So please consider directing your funds towards the World Alliance of Qara'im. I can promise you I'm not buying Rolls Royces and Mercedes and BMWs with this money. It is really being used to get our projects going, and these projects are so important at this point in time. This is, I really mean this from the heart. This is a critical time in the history of the nation of Israel, in the modern history and in the overall history of the nation of Israel. You guys see what's going on with October 7th, with the war with Iran, with the anti-Semitism raging in the United States, which is essentially the last major population of Jews in the world, right? The United States has about 6 million Jews, I think is the number. The number 2 country after that is France with about 400,000 Jews. So the last major population center of Jews in the entire world is the United States of America. We see what's going on in the United States of America. The United States is being shaken up in many ways. And I always give the analogy of the book of Jonah, that when Jonah ran away from his responsibilities, he was supposed to go to Nineveh. And by the way, you can, if you ever want to, you can visit Nineveh. Nineveh has been excavated. And if you're ever in Mosul, Iraq, you can actually visit the ancient city of Nineveh, which Jonah did not want to visit, although he eventually made his way over there. But he went down to the city of Jaffa, south of Tel Aviv, hopped on a boat, and the boat was shaken. The storm shook it because Jonah was shirking. He was avoiding his responsibilities. Yahweh wanted him to go to Nineveh, and he instead decided to run away. Well, the United States, I always use the analogy that the Jews in the United States are like Jonah on the boat. They were supposed to come. They should have already come to the state of Israel, to the land of Israel. We have a functioning state here. Okay, it's a bit problematic, but it's functioning, and people live here, and some live very well here. And but instead, they decided to run away from their responsibilities to come to the land of Israel and take a boat to America, figuratively and literally speaking. And now, just as Jonah, when he was on the boat and ran away from Nineveh, the boat was shaken up by a storm, to the point that eventually Jonah was thrown overboard. That's where he went into the belly of the whale. So now the United States is being shaken up by the storm of Yahweh in order to shake out the Jews. The Jews will eventually, whoever survives it, will eventually be thrown overboard, and some will unfortunately perish, and some will end up in the land of Israel. So that's the analogy that I always use. At any rate, the point that I was originally making is these are critical times in the modern history and in the overall history of the people of Israel. And I truly believe that this is where Karaism, Tanach-only, Chozrim b'Tanach, whatever you want to call our movement, this is where it comes in. And so, yeah, I've already said everything I have to say. Okay, we're going to go now into the book of Zechariah, the last chapter of the book of Zechariah. Let me bring up the screen. And let's make this happen. So I have to get rid of this. Stop that screen. Share this screen. And there we go. Okay. Let me get rid of this donation banner. Just after a while, it gets annoying. I don't like to put it up. Again, as I always say, anyone who knows me, and there are people here who have known me for decades, knows that I am not a materialistic person. And so I don't like talking about money issues, but it's necessary. It really is. We really have so much that needs to be done. And we live in the real world, and the real world requires funds. And that's the reason I talk about this stuff. Okay, enough of that. Let's go on to Zechariah chapter 13. So we're going to go to Zechariah 14, but again, because Zechariah is such a complicated book, and in general, I like to do this, okay? A good teacher, and I try to aspire to be a good teacher, will always, they say that a good teacher says what he's going to say, then says it, and then says what he said, right? So there's a lot of preview and there's a lot of review. We learned the book of Zechariah chapter 13 last week. We reviewed it at the end, and now we're going to review it even one more time. I'm going to read it very quickly through in the English. Especially, I'm focusing on this a bit more in the book of Zechariah, because the book of Zechariah is a bit of a difficult book to understand, as we've seen. It's one of the more cryptic and difficult books of the Tanakh to understand, both the themes that are being spoken about and even the Hebrew at times is a bit esoteric. It's a bit cryptic. So we're going to review very quickly Zechariah chapter 13, and then we'll dig into the final chapter of Zechariah, which is Zechariah chapter 14. Okay, so this is a review from last week. On that day, a fountain will be opened to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity. On that day, I will banish the names of the idols from the land, and they will be remembered no more, declares Yahweh Almighty. I will remove both the prophets and the spirit of impurity from the land. And prophets means the false prophets, as we shall see. That's the context. The Torah is very contextual. Words don't mean things, or words don't have meaning usually in the Tanakh in isolation. Their meaning is derived very often from the context. Same in any language, but especially in Hebrew, where words are very pithy and can have various meanings depending on their context. And if anyone still prophesies falsely, their father and mother to whom they were born will say to them, "You must die, because you have told lies in Yahweh's name." Then their own parents will stab the one who prophesies. It's pretty intense prophecy, right? On that day, it's infanticide, or at least, childcide. On that day, every prophet will be ashamed of their prophetic vision. Again, that's every false prophet we're talking about here will be ashamed of their prophetic vision. They will not put on a prophet's garment of hair in order to deceive. That's usually translated, the garment of hair we saw was aderet, usually translated as a mantle or a robe. I think there it says aderet sa'ir, so a mantle of hair. We also last week spoke about the prophets Eliyahu, Elijah, and Elisha. Elisha and Elijah wore an aderet, a robe, and then that robe was left behind for Elisha after Eliyahu disappeared off into outer space on chariots of fire. We spoke about that on a chariot of fire being led by horses of fire. Right? That is a famous story about Elijah the prophet. At any rate, each will say, "I am not a prophet. I am a farmer. The land has been my livelihood since my youth." If someone asks, "What are these wounds on your body?" they will answer, "These wounds I was given at the house of my friends." In other words, they're gonna every false prophet will be ashamed of their vision, and they're gonna try to hide the fact that they were a false prophet, that they were prophesying falsely, that they were prophets, quote unquote prophets, because they'll be ashamed and because they're going to be worried at that time that they're going to be killed by their parents or whoever gets hold of them. Okay. Awake, and then we have this pithy little lamentation at the end. "Awake, sword against my shepherd, against the man who is close to me, declares Yahweh Almighty. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. And I will turn my hand against the little ones." So shepherd, of course, is always an analogy for the leader. And this is speaking about the leader over Israel. And this is clearly an end of days prophecy. "In the whole land, declares Yahweh, 2/3 will be struck down and perish, yet 1/3 will be left in it. This third I will put into the fire. I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. They will call on my name." Right there we have a prophecy that we're going to call out to the name Yahweh, not Hashem, and not Adonai, and not Elohim or Elohim. None of those are his names. His name is Yahweh. That's what it means here. They will call my name Yahweh, and I will answer them. I will say, "They are my people," and they will say, "Yahweh is our God." So an end of days prophecy, right? With 2/3 dying. And this is speaking about within Israel, and 1/3 surviving, a remnant, once again. So that's Zechariah chapter 13. We're going to now move on to Zechariah chapter 14, and we're going to study it in the Hebrew. Okay. So let me get that set up here. Let me try my little trick. Give me 1 second here. Oops, I got to do it this way. Nope, that's not what I meant to do. Let's try that one more time. Open link and split view. Actually, no. I'm used to doing it the other way already, so let me do it the other way. So we're going to do it from here. And then I'm going to do open link in split view. And then over here, we're going to go to Zechariah chapter 14. The last chapter of Zechariah. We're going to study it in, oh, we don't want that. We just want the straight out English. There we go. Okay. So here we are in Zechariah 14. We've got our Robert altar set up. Again, please don't think that I am a blind fan of Robert Alter. I use him to kind of shed a second eye on what we're seeing, to get a kind of different opinion, or sometimes to confirm the opinion that I'm thinking. And there are many other commentators out there, but he's good, he's modern, he's accessible, he's very good, actually. He's excellent, and that's why I use him. But there are sometimes I disagree with him. Okay, we're in Zechariah chapter 14. Let's get going. Any questions, any comments before we start? Shabbat Shalom, Tsuri. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. Always a pleasure to see you. Okay, so if there are no questions, then let us get going here in Zechariah chapter 14. And we're going to read in the Hebrew. Okay. Hine yom ba liYahweh v'hulak shilalech b'kirbech. So behold, a day is coming to Yahweh. A day of Yahweh is coming. And your plunder shall be divided up in your midst. This is a horrible translation. I mean, the NIV is usually very good. Okay. Let's get a Robert Alter translation on that one. Okay. Look, a day is coming for Yahweh when what is despoiled from you shall be shared out in your midst. Okay. So, in other words, you're going to see yourself, and this is a message to Israel. Okay. So, there's a message of, well, we'll see. Let's go on. Verse 2. So, this is a long verse, so we're going to break it up. How do we break it up? As I've said many times, pretty much every single verse in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew, the text of the Tanakh, has a semicolon. That semicolon looks like a little wishbone. And let's find it. Can't find it. I don't know if it's an error just in this. That's weird. Oh, that's very strange. This one doesn't have one. There's some verses that don't. And I don't know if this is just a mistake on the text here. Let me just look again. Maybe I'm missing it. Okay. There's no etnach. It's called an etnach. This is it right here, first in the first verse, the little wishbone looking thing. But unless my eyes are deceiving me, I don't see an etnach here in this verse, which is very rare, but does happen in some verses. So, okay, we don't have any semicolon to break it up. So we'll just go through the entire verse. Verse 2. Wasafti et kol hagoyim el Yerushalayim. I will gather all of the nations to Jerusalem. Lemilchama, for war. Wenilkada ir, and the city will be captured. It will be taken. Wenashsul abatim, and the houses will be violated. Here they translate it as ransacked. That's a good hanashim. The houses will be ransacked. Hanashim. Well, what it really says in the text here, so I'm going to just read the text rather than the Ketiv of the Kri. The Ketiv of the Kri, if you know what that is, I'm just going to read the Ketiv here. Tish alna. So basically it means will be raped. Yetza hatzia ir begola, bagola, and half of the city will go out into exile. Wayeter am lo yikaret min ha'ir, and the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Okay, let's read that again in the English. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. So this is an end of days prophecies, an end of days prophecy, and this has not yet happened. So we're to take this as reliable prophecy. This will happen in the future. This is a future prophecy about all of the nations gathering against Israel, gathering against Jerusalem. Seems like that's shaping up right now. We see how much opposition there is to Israel. We see how much each day it seems is more and more of a call among various nations to turn against Israel. I was listening to, was it Tucker? I think it was Piers Morgan. I think it was one of Piers Morgan's guests. He does a lot of stuff on Israel. He does a lot of Israel stuff. And I was listening to him, and I believe it was him, and one of his guests said we need to, it was one of his guests. I think I remember who it was, but I won't give the person the honor of mentioning the person's name. So I think that this person says something like it's gotten to the point where we must restrain Israel from their destruction of southern Lebanon and for their genocide in Gaza. Right? So there's more and more of a call among the nations to get an army together, right? An international army, whether it's the UN or NATO, or not NATO at this point, but who knows, maybe down the road, whatever it is, to get a band of nations together to come attack Israel, to come attack Jerusalem, to stop them from the quote unquote, destruction in southern Lebanon and the quote unquote genocide in Gaza. Okay, so this prophecy, right, might be coming true in the near future. Might. I don't know. I don't predict the future. There have been so many times in the past where people have thought it was the end of days, and it was not the end of days. That's where the religion of Christianity originally began, right? There was a charismatic teacher named Jesus, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him, who was predicting that the end of days was nigh, and that was not the case. So that's why the Christians had to invent the false idea of the second coming, because there were many. I was listening again to this professor that I mentioned earlier, and he does excellent lectures. It's I don't know if I haven't found any of his stuff in English. It's all in Hebrew, but if I do, then maybe I'll post it to the WhatsApp group. But he also was speaking about how, and it's mentioned in Josephus. Josephus was a very well-known historian around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, approximately 70 CE, and he gives a list of many different messianic figures that existed at that time. It was a time in this period of Roman rule right before the destruction of the Second Temple where there was a feeling that the end of days was near. There was a feeling there was apocalyptic fervor in the air, and it was out of this this atmosphere that figures such as the historical figure of Jesus grew. So getting back to what I was saying here is, it seems like a lot of things are in place for the end of days at this time, but because there have been so many false starts and false messiahs in the past, and I don't claim to be prophet or messiah or anything like that, but my point is, I even on a logical basis, I don't want to say or predict that this is what's happening right now. It seems like there are a lot of things in place that the end of days is coming pretty soon, but we shall wait and see. Okay, at any rate, so let's get a little commentary on this. I'm sure Robert Alter has something to say here. So the city that houses the women, the panorama of conquest moves inward and intensifies in concentric circle. First the city falls, and then the homes are ransacked, and worst of all, within the homes, the women are raped. But the rest of the people shall not be cut off. This prepares the ground for the great pivot, let's try that again, in which Yahweh, the Lord, sallies forth as a warrior God to rout the enemies. Should I make this a bit bigger? Maybe. Make this a bit bigger too. I think that's better. Okay, so we are now in verse 3. Verse 3. We asa Yahweh wanilham bagoyim hahem. And there's our semicolon, there's our nach. Kiyom hilahemo bayom krav. And Yahweh shall go out and fight against those nations on the day that as if he were fighting, or that one that he fights in the day of battle, like on the day of his fighting in the day of battle, is literally what it says. In other words, Yahweh is going to go out and fight against these nations. We saw a similar prophecy in chapter 12. Okay, let me just remind us of that. So I'm going back briefly to Zechariah chapter 12. Okay, verse 2. I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem on that day. When all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. Okay? On that day, I will strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness, declares Yahweh. So we saw in Zechariah chapter 12, this was also an eschatological or an end of days prophecy. We saw here that all of the nations, or this prophecy here, that the nations are going to come against Jerusalem. Okay. And that the analogy here is a cup of poison. I believe it says poison in the Hebrew. Right? So I'm going to translate it here as a cup of poison. That the analogy is that the nations think they're going to drink up Jerusalem like a cup of water, but that's going to be their end. Right? They're going to be tempted. They're going to see this tempting cup of water. They're going to drink it, and they're not going to. It's going to turn out that was a poison cup, and they're going to die from drinking out of that cup. In other words, they think they're going to come to Jerusalem, make an easy battle of it, but what's really going to happen is because Yahweh is going to be fighting for Israel, then that is going to be the end of the nations who come against Jerusalem. The same thing here. I'll make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. They think they're just going to pick up Jerusalem like a rock and toss it. And in fact, when they try to pick up Jerusalem, the allegory here is, or the metaphor is here, that they're going to break their back trying to pick up Jerusalem. It's going to be their end. So they think they're going to have an easy go at it. It's going to be tempting. They're going to come against Israel. They're going to come against Jerusalem, and that's where they're going to meet their demise. And we saw that back in Zechariah chapter 12. We have the same kind of prophecy here in Zechariah chapter 14. Let me just check in and see if there are any questions or comments. I don't see any. So, and these are all very famous verses. Verse 4, وَعَمْدُوا رَجْلَهُ بَيَوْمَهُ al har hazeitim asher al pnei Yerushalayim mikedem. Let's translate up until there. So his feet, meaning Yahweh's feet, and of course this is not meant literally because Yahweh does not have physical feet. So his feet shall stand, on that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives. And by the way, if you ever visit Israel, then you should definitely visit the Mount of Olives. I should also point out that one of the things I do and I love to do is guide tours of Israel. So if you ever want to come to Israel yourself, your family, or a group, let me know. And if we're in Jerusalem, one of the places I guarantee you we will go to is the Mount of Olives. It is without a doubt from the Mount of Olives one of the most beautiful views you'll ever see of the old city of Jerusalem. So Bayomahu al har hazeitim. So on that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, Asher pnei Yerushalayim, which is literally on the face of, but is right next to or faces Jerusalem. Mikedem, from the east. When Nivka har hazeitim mehatzio mizracha v'yama, and the Mount of Olives should be split in half to the east and to the west, literally to the direction of the rising sun and the direction of the sea. The sea there is talking about the Mediterranean Sea. Gdola me'od, and a very large valley shall be formed. Umash chatzi ahar tzafona v'chatzio negva, and half of the mountain shall move to the north, and half to the south. Okay. So, what do we have here? So we have a vision. Again, we read the English here. Let's do the Robert Alter English, and let's let it get a little bit of commentary. Right? And his feet shall stand on that day on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem from the east, and the Mount of Olives shall split in half from east to west into a very great valley, and half the mountain shall shift to the north and half to the south. Okay, so let's look at where the Mount of Olives is, just so you can get an idea what we're talking about. Let's do Google Maps. Olives. That's not Google Maps. That's Google Maps. Okay, so get rid of all this. Yikes. Okay, so we're looking. We can see that this is to the east over here. This is to the west over here. Okay, bring it in just a bit more. This is the old city of Jerusalem. This is the Temple Mount. This is the dome on the rock, the dome of the rock, which Jews like to call the Golden Pimple. This is the Kidron Valley. Okay, you see a lot of Christian sites here, like Gethsemane, and a bunch of others which are not showing up. But at any rate, this is the Mount of Olives to the east. And if you're standing on the Mount of Olives, and I've stayed, there's a wonderful hotel there, which I've stayed at. Let's see if we can find it. Let's see if we can find it right there. The Seven Arches Hotel. So you're standing here. Let's see if we can even get the view. Street view. We're now looking west. West. There's the hotel. I gotta go down a little bit. Well, you could see there's the old city right over there. See if I move down a little bit. Over there. Move down a bit more. I've stayed here. I've been there many, many times. So let's move over here if we can. Right. So you can see from the Mount of Olives, that's looking now to the west. And you get a wonderful view of the old city of Jerusalem. Okay. You can't see it very good from this particular picture. But trust me, it's just an amazing view. It's the best view of the old city of Jerusalem that you're going to find anywhere, right? So that's what we're talking about. Going back to the map itself, then we see that this is the Mount of Olives over here. Okay, this over here is the cemetery, the Mount of Olives Cemetery. There are a lot of Jews. It's a Jewish cemetery. And then we have the Kidron Valley. This is the valley between the Mount of Olives and Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. And then over here is the Temple Mount right there. It's the Western Wall. This is all the old city of Jerusalem right there. Okay. So that's the area that we're talking about. That's the geography of the area that we're talking about. Probably Hadassah. I like that imagery. So at any rate, right. So half of the mountain. Oh, right. We were reading Robert Alter's commentary there. Which faces Jerusalem's enemies would have come from the east, and the Mount of Olives was split in half. God's principal weapon in this battle is a cataclysmic earthquake. And that's it. That's verse 4. Let's go on to verse 5. Right? So again, what's going to happen according to this prophecy in verse 4 is the mountain is going to split. Let's see if I can make this happen. The Mount of Olives is going to split from east to west, and then half is going to go to the north, and then the other half is going to go to the south. Right? That's what the prophecy is speaking about. Let me make sure that shows up on the screen. It does. Very good. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, getting back to our prophecy. So verse 5. Wenastem ge harai. Ki yagia ge harim el atzal. I'm sorry, atzal. Wenastem kasher nastem me harash bime Uziyahu. Uzziah Melech Yehuda ubat Yahweh Elohei kol kedoshim imach. Okay, let's do a little bit of a translation here. V'nastim geharai, and you shall flee into the valley of my mountain. Ki yagia geharim el atzal, because the valley of the mountain, or the mountains, will reach out to Atzal, which is a place. We'll talk about that in a second. And you will flee before the earthquake. Rash means like literally the shaking or the huge noise or shaking. So you shall flee before the earthquake. As you did before the earthquake. I'm sorry, you shall flee V'nasim kasher nasim, and you should flee as you fled before the earthquake in the times of Uzziah, the king of Judah, which is mentioned elsewhere in the Tanakh. Uba Yahweh, Elohai kol kedoshim imach. And Yahweh, the God of all of the holy ones, shall come with you. All right, so this is a kind of a complicated. Let's try to pick apart here what's going on. Okay, let's get a little commentary. Let's get a little translation first. We'll get Robert Alter, okay, to give his rendition. So we get another eye on it. And the valley of my mountain shall be blocked, as the valley of the mountains reaches as far as Azal, and it shall be blocked as it was blocked by the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah. And Yahweh, my God, shall come, all the holy ones with him. So that's interesting. Robert Alter translates it as blocked. We'll see why he is in the valley of my mountain shall be blocked. We'll see why he translates it that way. That's not the usual translation. Okay, the usual translation we see here is you will flee by my mountain valley, and you'll flee as you fled from the earthquake. So let's try to see why he translated as blocked. So he says the Masoretic text, that's the Hebrew text, reads "wanastem," and you shall flee, but the strong scholarly consensus is that the word should be vocalized to show what nistam, as it does in some Hebrew manuscripts in the three ancient versions. So that's a kind of a technical point. I'm not going to get into that technical point right now. Those of you who are familiar with the vocalization by the Masoretes of the Hebrew text, and if you learn biblical Hebrew with me, you will be, know, right? So what they're saying here is that this might be read in a different way, wanistam, rather than vinastem. And so therefore that explains his translation. Okay, all the holy ones, these would be the divine entourage, meaning essentially the angels. With him, the Masoretic readings is with you, but almost all the ancient versions have with him. Interesting. Okay, I'm not going to belabor the point because it's a bit technical, but we can go with either translation. This is the traditional translation. I like Robert Alter's reasoning here. Okay. Let's go on. This is also a famous verse. This entire chapter is pretty famous. Just give me 1 second. I want to turn on the lights here. It's getting a bit dark. Okay. Verse 6. והיה ביום ההוא לא יהיה אור עיקרות וקיפאון. Okay, so, and it shall be on the day there will not be light. Ikarot, so the translating this is cold, like kor. Wakipaon, and frostiness. Okay, this also is a bit of a confusing passage. So the NIV translates it, on that day there will be neither sunlight nor cold frosty darkness. Robert Alter translates it on as, I should say, and it shall happen that on that day there shall be no daylight nor chill moonlight. And I just want to look up this word, my own edification, for 1 second. Yeah, I'm not sure why he's choosing that choice of words of translation, but let's get a little. This is a construction of many modern versions, but the Hebrew is cryptic, right? And the Hebrew is indeed cryptic here. So, as I've always mentioned, that when the Hebrew is cryptic, as it is in this verse, that that you're going to get a lot of different translations. And if we were to check the various translations, we would probably have a bunch of different translations. Although this seems to be the kind of the standard one. Okay. So we'll just leave it at that for now. Okay. Again, I don't want to get too technical here, but the in the text is written Yikpa'un, and it's actually read as Kipa'on. In other words, there's a correction here from a yud to a waw. Again, I don't want to get too technical now. Let's just leave it at that. Verse 7. והיה יום אחד הוא יועדה ליהוה לא יום ולא לילה והיה לעת ערב יהיה אור. So והיה יום אחד, and it shall be one day, or a special day, I guess you can translate it as. It will be a memorable day, a unique day. והיה יום אחד הוא יועדה ליהוה. It shall be a unique day that is known to Yahweh. Okay, but maybe that is known only to Yahweh. Lo yom velo laila. It shall not be day and it shall not be night. And it shall be that as the time of the evening approaches, or at the time of the evening, that there shall be light. So this is very interesting. Let's get a little commentary on it. So this is verse 7. And it shall be a single day, it shall be known to Yahweh, neither day nor night it shall be. At eventide there shall be light. And Robert Alter doesn't render any commentary on it, so let's leave it alone. Verse 8. Let's just check and see if there are any questions or comments. Hadassah, no, it does not. It's different. So Hadassah is asking, does Azal have anything to do with the goat of Yom Kippur that is sent out to Azazel? So let's go back to that for 1 second. So here it's just transliterated poorly. So it's not really Azal. It's, if we read it in the modern pronunciation, it would actually be Atzal, with a tzadi, and Azazel is with a Zion, Azazel. Okay, so it's two different letters. We can even see, let's look at it a bit more and we'll get an idea, at least from some Hebrew dictionaries. Proper name of a location near Jerusalem, but no site and identification. Yeah, and this is a very reliable Hebrew dictionary, biblical Hebrew dictionary. This is the BDB. And it doesn't, I mean, there are some cases where tzadi and zayin can interchange, like zoek and tzoek. But at least this dictionary here doesn't identify it at all with Azazel. And it wouldn't even make sense anyway, because Azazel is with an ayin, and this is with an aleph. So no, there's no connection. And here we even have other places where this places, or other occurrences in the Tanakh where this place is listed. So in the genealogies of Benjamin, the name Atzel appears as the great-grandson of Saul through Jonathan. The chronicler records, that means in the book of Chronicles, Motzah father Binia, etc., etc. And his Rapha was his son, Elisha, I guess it's supposed to be his son, and Atzel his son. Atzel had 6 sons, and so on and so forth. Okay. So this has absolutely nothing to do with Azazel. It's different letters completely. Azazel would be an ayin and a zayin. This is an aleph and a tzadi. There are some cases where we could make an argument that the tzadi and the zayin might interchange. and means similar things, but definitely not the ayin and the aleph. Those are completely two different phonemes. They're two different consonants altogether, and they don't interchange. Okay, so hope that answers your question. You're welcome. So, right. So where are we? So there's going to be this day of the Lord, right? Day of the Lord is referred to in other places, such as in Amos. We saw it, I believe, in Malachi, if I remember correctly. So this idea that there's going to be this day at the end of days, right at the end of days, when there's going to be this special day. Just give me 1 second here. Maybe we'll just check something else out that might be relevant. All right, so let's look at there are many different places. Yeah, we did see it in Malachi. I'm looking at it right now. At the end of Malachi. But we can look at very quickly at Amos, which we'll eventually get to. Chapter 5. Let's do that. So Amos chapter 5. Verse 18. And this is also a very famous verse. Amos. It's an old Israeli movie. Amos chapter 5. And it doesn't matter because I'm going to bring up the whole thing. Let me go over to the Hebrew. So we're in the book of Amos, in the book of Amos. And oops, that's not what I meant to do. Not close enough, it doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter. 1 second here. Oh, we could do it this way. It's fine. Okay. And it says, this is in the book of Amos, chapter 5. Famous verse. Let me make this a bit bigger. This is verse 18. Hoi. Hamita'awim et yom Yahweh. Lama ze lechem? Yom Yahweh hu choshech velo or. Woe to you. Woe to those who are looking forward to the day of Yahweh. Why are you doing so regarding the day of Yahweh? Or I should say, Lama ze lechem yom Yahweh hu. No, why are you doing such a thing? Yom Yahweh hu choshech velo or. The day of Yahweh is going to be a day of darkness, not a day of light. Verse 19, this is Amos chapter 5, verse 19. Kasher yanus ish mipnei ha'ari, upag'o hadov, this is also a very famous verse. Uba habayit, v'samach yado al akir v'nashcho hanachash. So just as one runs away from the lion and runs into a bear, and then comes home and leans his hand against the wall and is bitten by a snake, and the snake bites him. Halo choshech yom Yahweh velo or, afel velo nogalo. Is not the day of Yahweh darkness rather than light, and not light? Afel velo nogalo. And isn't it, again, darkness, another word for darkness? This is classic Tanakhic parallelism. So it kind of repeats itself using slightly, this is poetry, so it's using slightly different words. So let me do another translation of this. Is not darkness that which characterizes the day of Yahweh, not light, and dimness rather than brightness for it. Okay, so we see here, and there are many other places where we get the same idea. There are a bunch of places we saw also in Malachi chapter 4, the end of Malachi, one of the last verses in Malachi. Remember, before we studied Zechariah, we studied Malachi, and we saw a similar sentiment right there about the great and terrible day of the Lord. And here we see in Amos chapter 5, verses 18 and 20, that again, this day of the Lord is going to be a day of darkness, not a day of light. Why are you looking forward to it? You think there's going to be light? You think it's going to be a day of when you're going to see light and when you're going to be rewarded? No, it's going to be a day of terror and punishment. Don't look forward to it so much. Okay. Let me check in and see if there are any questions or comments. So back to Zechariah chapter 14. So we read that, verse 8. Right? So it's going to be a day of darkness, not light, but in the evening time, there'll be some light. So it seems to be a very specific day, right? A single day. Day is not meant as an era or is not meant figuratively. It's meant quite literally. Verse 8. Let's find our semicolon. Yeah, this is very weird. This is very rare. So now this is the second verse we've come across in Zechariah chapter 14 that doesn't have the that doesn't have the semicolon. And I'm assuming sometimes this website will make some errors. No, there it is. It's almost towards the end. We found it. Okay. Verse 8. So it shall be that on that day, living waters. Living waters means running waters, like river water or something like that. Okay. We'll translate it as running waters. Even though literally it says living waters. But on that day shall come running waters or living waters out of Jerusalem. Hatziam elayam kadmoni. Hatziam elayam ha'achron. Half of them to the eastern sea, that's speaking about the Dead Sea, and half of them to the western sea, and that's speaking about the Mediterranean Sea. Literally, it says the sea that's behind, and this says the sea that's in front. We'll talk about that in a second. And it shall be so in the winter, in the summer, and in the winter. Well, there's a lot of interesting information that's packed in here. So we saw earlier, right, that we had the prophecy that the Mount of Olives was going to be split into from the east to the west. Half of the mountain was going to move to the north. Half of the mountain was going to move to the south, which now means there's going to be a channel running east-west. Well, that's being picked up here in verse 8. Okay, on that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it east to the Dead Sea and half of it west to the Mediterranean Sea in summer and in winter. In other words, there's going to be a new river, or shall we say two rivers actually. There's going to be a water source. When that mountain splits, when the Mount of Olives splits, half of it to the north and half of it to the south, then right here, right, there's going to be a river. River going this way towards the Dead Sea, and another river going this way towards the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, and I'll zoom out in a second and we can see exactly what the relationship is or how far away they are. So literally says, it doesn't say the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. It literally says the sea that's in front of us and the sea and half of it to the sea that's behind us. This is usually translated, or this is often translated as the Eastern Sea and the Western Sea, but literally means the forward-looking sea, or the sea looking forward and the sea looking back. And this raises a very interesting point, as many scholars have pointed this out. When we orient ourselves on a map in modern times, in the Western world, our orientation is towards the north, right? Always looking towards the north. So if we say to the left, we're often talking to the west. If we say to the right, we're often talking to the east. If we say down, we're talking to the south, and so on. In ancient Israel and in the ancient Near East in general, the orientation was not towards the north, it was towards the east, towards the rising sun. So when this says the sea that's in front of us and the sea that's behind us, again, here they're translating it, they're interpreting it as the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And you'll see other translations where it'll see the Western Sea and the Eastern Sea, or the Eastern Sea and the Western Sea. But really what it means is the sea that's in front of us and the sea that's behind us, because in ancient Israel and the ancient Near East, the orientation was to the east, to the rising sun. And so if you're looking to the east, to the rising sun, then the Dead Sea will be in front of you, and the Mediterranean Sea will be behind you. Why towards the rising sun? Because the rising sun in the ancient Near East, and probably beyond, but I'm focusing here on the ancient Near East, was considered. It was considered a sign of strength, right? The strength of the new day. And in fact, most, I don't know about most, but many, in general, pagan temples in the ancient Near East were oriented towards the east, towards facing the east. So if you walked into a pagan temple, you would be walking east. You would be walking towards the direction of the rising sun. And if you then walked towards the idol and bowed down before the idol, you'd be bowing to the east. You'd be bowing in the direction of the rising sun. In our temple, or in our tabernacle that's described in the book of Exodus and elsewhere, it's just the opposite. When you walk into the temple, you're walking towards the west. You're walking away from the rising sun, right? So it's a polemic. Someone many years ago, when I visited in 2019, there's a live recreation of the tabernacle a bit north of the city of Eilat, in the southern tip of the modern state of Israel, called Timna Park. And the guy there, who's excellent guide, pointed this out, that when you walk into the tabernacle of Yahweh, you're walking away from the rising sun. You're not walking towards the east, you're walking towards the west. And let's even see here. Tabernacle map. Right. So that here would be an example. Okay. So bring that up. Okay. So here's the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant. Here's the showbread table, the menorah, the incense altar, and here's, forget all this truth, way, in life stuff. As you're walking into the tent of meeting, okay, into the holy area, towards the Holy of Holies, you're walking from the east to the west. You're walking away from the rising sun. And when you bow down, your face is towards the west, is away from the rising sun, and your butt is facing the rising sun, almost as if you're as if a symbolic polemic against these idols, right? You're sticking your butt in the face of their false idol, the rising sun. Okay, the house of the rising sun, right? Okay, let me check in, see if there are any comments or any questions. So, and this river is going to flow in the summer and in the winter. Why is this significant? Because there are many rivers. I live in the Golan Heights, and in the Golan Heights, there are many rivers and around Israel in general, that dry up in the summertime. This is not just in Israel. This is common in a lot of dry climates. In Israel, overall, is a Mediterranean climate, right, which is dry, or there's a dry season, I should say. So during the dry season, there are many rivers and streams that dry up. They don't run. And those are called Nachal Kaziv. Those are called deceptive rivers, or temporary rivers, are usually translated as. And then a Nachal Eitan is one that runs year round. Its water source is strong enough, like the Dan River, which I visited recently and I did videos on it. You can see it on the World Alliance of Qara'im or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel. So those are the strongest rivers, right? Those are the permanent rivers that run not just in the wintertime when it's the rainy season here, but in the summertime when we have approximately 6 months without any rain whatsoever. That's the way a Mediterranean climate such as Israel works. Okay, 6 months of rain, 6 months of dryness without rain. Okay, so and I think we're going to do one last verse and then we'll continue it next time. And this is a very famous verse, very important verse. So we have this prophecy that there's going to be a river Again, let's look at the map for 1 second. If we back out of the map a little bit, let me leave that there, but I think it's gonna, oh, I gotta get rid of this for a second. Okay, so let's zoom out. Okay, so there's Jerusalem, right around here. Okay, and to the west, I'm sorry, to the east is the Dead Sea. It's right around here. So to the east is the Dead Sea, and to the west is the Mediterranean Sea. And the river is going to run, right? So the Mount of Olives, let's say, is right around here. So the river is going to run half of it to the Dead Sea, and the other half to the Mediterranean Sea, which implies there's going to be a very strong water source when that earthquake occurs on the Mount of Olives, and half of the mountain moves to the north, and half of the mountain moves to the south, opening up this river. It's going to reveal a water source that's deep in the earth, underneath the Mount of Olives, that is going to well up. It's going to spring up and create the flow in these two directions. And by the way, geographically, this actually makes sense because I don't know specifically if it's the Mount of Olives. I'm assuming it is, but right around this area here is going to be Shoham. Can you stop that, please? Right around here is going to be the difference in the, or is going to be the cutoff between the Mediterranean watershed. I think I'm using that term correctly, and the Dead Sea watershed. In other words, anything more or less to the east is going to flow towards the Dead Sea, and anything more or less to the west of this line, give or take, is going to flow to the Mediterranean Sea. And so this is exactly what this verse seems to be implying, that the Mount of Olives, right around here, right, is the cutoff point between the, again, I hope I'm using the phrase correctly, the Dead Sea watershed area and the Mediterranean Sea watershed area. Okay, at any rate, I think we're going to stop there because I want to go to, no, we're going to do this one last verse because it's famous. והיה יהוה למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה יהוה אחד ושמו אחד. And it shall be, or Yahweh will be king over all of the world on that day. היה יהוה למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא. I'm sorry. Yahweh will be king over all of the world. On that day, Yahweh shall be one, and his name shall be one. So what does that mean? From this context here, what does it mean Yahweh shall be one, and his name shall be one? Right? Clearly, the implication here is that he will be the only God that's recognized. It doesn't mean that he's not a right? That he's not a multitude of gods. He never was a multitude of gods. Okay? What it means is that he'll be recognized as the only God. Yahweh shall be one, and his name shall be one. And his name shall be the only name of any God pronounced throughout the world. That's what this means. Okay? This sheds light. Well, let's get a little commentary, and then I'll finish off with my thoughts on that. So, okay, and Yahweh shall be king over all the earth. On that day, Yahweh shall be one, and his name one. And actually, Robert Alder does not provide any commentary on that critical verse. I'm surprised a little bit. Fresh waters will come out from Jerusalem. Jerusalem thus becomes a source of fructification for all its distant environs. The vision may be inspired by the stream flowing out from the temple in Ezekiel 47, right, which we won't get into right now, but we will get into very briefly. We're going to go to Deuteronomy. Oops. The famous verse in Deuteronomy. Sorry. Chapter 6, verse 4. Okay. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one, or in Hebrew, it's a very famous verse. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Let's look at that in the Hebrew for a second. I think I could just look at this one verse without having to switch over to the entire chapter. We'll go to the Hebrew. I don't like that version of the Hebrew. No, it doesn't matter. Okay. So Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. So this is often understood as a statement of monotheism. In other words, God is not a multitude of gods, right? As, let's say, in Christianity, where they have the Trinity, 3 is 1, 1 is 3. You know, that's why maybe Christians don't do so well in the math section of the SATs, you know, because 1 equals 3, 3 equals 1, so they screw up. I'm just making a joke. At any rate, but now if we shed light, so here it says at the end, Yahweh Echad, Yahweh is one. If we look at Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9, we see the same phrase, Yahweh Echad, Ushmo Echad. But let's read the entire verse. And it shall be, Haya Yahweh lemelech hakol haaretz, and it shall be that Yahweh shall be king over all of the world. Beyomahu, on that day, Yahweh Echad Ushmo Echad. On that day, Yahweh shall be one, and his name shall be one. So what does it mean on the day Yahweh shall be one? Does it mean before that he was a Trinity? He was 10, like the Sfirot of the Kabbalah, the medieval Christian and Muslim inspired mysticism of the Kabbalah. You heard of the Kabbalah, right? No, it couldn't mean that before this he was 3 or 10 or anything else. He was always one. He was always a singularity. There's not more than one God. But so clearly, if it says on that day he will be one, it doesn't mean that he was a multiplicity of gods before that. It means on that day he'll be recognized as the only God. Right? So this sheds light on this phrase, Yahweh Echad, Shmo Echad, and his name shall be one. Does that mean his name wasn't one before? No, of course, that was always his name. It's just that he was called by a multiplicity of names, or perhaps that people were calling out to names of different foreign gods. This is saying essentially that the entire world will recognize him as the only God and his name as the only true name of the only true God, right? So Yahweh Echad here means the entire world, he will be recognized as the only God. So if we go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, and we see the exact same phrase, Yahweh Echad, then we can extrapolate, not that this is a statement that Yahweh is a singularity of God, but this means that Yahweh is the only God, okay? The only God to be recognized by Israel. Listen, Israel. Understand, Israel. Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is our only God. He's the only single one God. Maybe that's a better way to understand Deuteronomy 6:4, rather than thinking, as many Jews do, as most Jews do, that this is a statement of monotheism. Of course, the Torah is monotheistic. Of course, there's only one God, and his name is Yahweh. But what this is saying, this seems to be saying, if we cross-reference the same phrase in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9, what this seems to be saying is that he must be recognized as the only God. Yahweh Echad means Yahweh is the only God. He's the only true God. He's the only God to be recognized in the context of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, in this famous verse, the Shema. It means that Israel should recognize God, Yahweh as our God, and Yahweh is our only God, our one and only God. And here, the entire world, in the end of the days, will recognize Yahweh as the one and only God, and his name as the one and only name of the one and only God. Okay? And with that, we'll end our study of Zechariah. We'll pick it up next time in verse 10. The chapter has a total of 20 verses, so we're just about halfway through, a little bit less. But we'll pick it up. Oops, no, I hate when I do that. We'll pick it up in verse 10. next time. And let me make a little bit of a note for myself here. And then after Zechariah, we'll work our way backwards. The next book we're going to read is Haggai. Just give me 1 second to make a little bit of a note for next time. So it's 14:10. Good. Any questions, any comments? Any questions, any comments before we go on to Leviticus chapter 26? We'll go for about another 40 minutes or so. Around 9 o'clock p.m. my time. I'm going to put up a song for a minute or two. Just drink some water, take a stretch, and then we will come back and we will continue in Leviticus chapter 26. So see you guys back in just a couple minutes.
ילדי הטוב והנאה, אל תירא ואל תפחד. My son, I have nothing I can give but this chance that you may live. will meet again, if He will deliver Hush now, my baby, be still, love, don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby. So I'll be with you when you dream. River, oh river, flow gently for me. Such precious cargo you bear. Do you know somewhere he can live free? River, deliver him there. Rather, you're safe now, and safe may you stay. For I have a prayer just for you. Grow, baby brother, come back someday. Come and deliver us too.
Okay, we're back. And that's weird. I don't know why it usually has my background, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. As you can see, I'm sitting outside. And we will continue. Let's see if I can get this background going. Just give me 1 second here. Strange. Just give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, we should be good to go now. So, all right, so we're going to dig into Leviticus chapter 26. Let me share the screen. So we're in Leviticus chapter 26. The cat is going crazy because it's time for him to eat, and he starts driving me nuts until I give him food. What did I read this? I read the other day that what's the difference between dogs and cats? Dogs say, "Oh, this human brings me food. He must be a god," and cats say, "Oh, this human brings me food. I must be a god." Pretty much sums up my cats. Anywho, so we're in Leviticus chapter 26. So just to do a little bit of review. So we were talking about, so this chapter is the reward and the punishment, the blessing and the curse. It's often translated as or described as. Okay, so we saw the reward for obedience. We're going to go through again, just very briefly in the English. So the beginning of Leviticus chapter 26, and we're going to pick it up in the Hebrew in verse 14. But again, just to get the context and by way of review, let me read it in the English, just the initial chapters, which are the blessing. So do not make idols or set up an image or a sacred stone for yourselves, and do not place a carved stone in your land to bow down before it. I am Yahweh your God. Observe my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands, I will send you rain in its season, and the ground will yield its crops, and the trees their fruit. So this is the beginning of the blessing. If you follow my decrees, if then, right? This is a contingency. This is a predicate and what's the opposite of predicate? I can't remember offhand, but it's an if-then statement, right? If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commandments. Now I have to look up what the opposite of predicate is. 1 second. Sometimes these things get in a person's head, you got it. One second. Sorry about that. All right, doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll do that for myself later. At any rate, so Leviticus chapter 26. So if you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands, I will send you rain in its season, and the ground will yield its crops, and the trees their fruit. Your threshing floor will continue into the grape harvest, meaning the wheat harvest, or the barley/wheat harvest will continue to the grape harvest, and the grape harvest will continue to the planting. And you will eat all the food you want and live in safety in your land. I will grant you peace in your land, and you will lie down, and no one will make you afraid. I will remove wild beasts from your land. Remember, we spoke about last week about how wild beasts were actually a threat, especially the lion and the bear. We saw the lion and the bear mentioned in Amos chapter 5, verse 18. You'll run away from the lion, and you'll encounter the bear. You'll go home, you'll lean against the wall, and the snake will bite you, right? So these were real in ancient Israel. These were real threats, right? Lions roam the land, bears roam the land, and if you live in a part of the country, let's say in the United States, let's say in the country in the Northeast or out west. So in the Northeast they have black bears, out west they have grizzly bears. You know that bears can actually be a problem. People are fearful of bears, and there have been many incidents. I grew up in New York City, but I spent a lot of time in the surrounding area in the Northeast, hiking or on vacation or whatever. And bears were always, I wouldn't say a constant worry, but there were plenty of incidents where bears injured people, killed babies, swiped babies out of baby carriages. I remember hearing a couple of stories like that. So these were real threats: the lion, the bear, the snake. Okay. At any rate, and the sword will not pass through your country. You will pursue your enemies, and they will fall by the sword before you. 5 of you will chase 100, 100 of you will chase 100 of you will chase 10,000. Your enemies will fall by the sword before you. I will look on you with favor and make you fruitful and increase your numbers, and I will keep my covenant with you. Remember, so this really is, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. Right? Increase your numbers, multiply you. You will still be eating last year's harvest when you'll have to move it out to make room for the new. I will put my dwelling place among you, and I will not abhor you. Dwelling place is clearly the tabernacle. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. I am Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of Egypt so that you would no longer be slaves to the Egyptians. I broke the bars of your yoke and enabled you to walk with heads held high. So that's the blessing. If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commandments, all of these blessings, all these good things are going to happen to you. Now we're up to the punishment, the curse. Again, this chapter is usually referred to as the blessing and the curse. Show, you'll get your food soon, sweetheart. No, we don't. No, that's not a toy. Okay. So we're in verse 14. In the Hebrew, we're reading in the Hebrew. It's on the other side this time. It's fine. Well, im lo tishma'u li v'lo ta'asu et kol hamisvot ha'ela. So if you do not pay attention to me, if you do not hearken to me, heed me, and do not do all of these commandments, right? So before it was, if you do all of these commandments, right? If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commandments, here, if you do not listen to me, and let's just look at the Hebrew again for that, okay? So if you keep and do my commandments, then the good things will happen. And if you do not listen to and do not do all of these commandments, tim asu, v'im mishpatai tir'al nafshechem. Again, classic. Oops, I just pressed on this. I didn't mean to. Back. So if you will not, so im b'chukotai tim asu. So if you grow weary or if you grow sick of my statutes, ve'im et mishpatai tigal nafshechem, and if you abhor, or if you revile, I think maybe is a better way to translate it. Okay, if your souls, horrible translation, soul, but that's the way they often translate it. If your souls or if yourselves revile my judgments, okay, and what we have here, let's get the English translation just for a second. If you reject my decrees and abhor my laws, okay, that's a poor translation. I don't like that at all. It really means if you get sick and tired of my statutes, and if you revile, if your souls revile my judgments, and this is classic. A lot of verses or multiple verses often are in parallel. This is classic, what we can call biblical Hebrew or Hebrew Bible parallelism. So it's a poetic repetition. This, if you grow weary or if you grow sick of my statutes, and if you despise my judgments, right? If you grow sick of my statutes, and if you despise my judgments, it's called synonymous parallelism. The two halves of the verse, the two verselets, actually, this is even less than these two clauses are in parallel with each other. They're repeating each other. They're repetitions of each other using different words. This is very classical Tanakhic parallelism. Okay, it's called synonymous parallelism because the first clause is equivalent in meaning to the second clause. It's just using different words. It's a repetition, as we say pretty much every Torah study. Repetition means emphasis. So this is a poetic way of emphasizing the point, right? So, lebilti asot kol mitzvotai, lehafarchem et briti, and you do not, or in doing so, do not, or in not by not doing all of my commandments. And in doing so, nullifying or ignoring my covenant. Okay. So here's our if clause, right? Here's our if clause. Verse 15 is the if clause. Let's get a Robert Alter translation on this one, because I don't like the NIV translation here at all. Okay. So if you reject my statutes and if you loathe my laws, not doing all my commandments, voiding my covenant, and that's a much better translation. Okay. Back to the Hebrew. Af ani eseh zot lachem. Then I will do this to you. And we're going to get to this. In other words, colon. Ve'ifkadati alechem behala. Okay. And here starts all the horrible things that are going to happen to us. And many of them have happened to us because we did not keep his commandments. We loathed his commandments. We despised his laws. We ignored our covenant with him. That's what rabbinical Judaism is. That's exactly what rabbinical Judaism is. And it's a very sneaky way of disobeying the covenant because it seems like you're keeping the covenant. Yes, we're religious Jews. We keep the covenant. We keep the Torah. No, you don't keep the Torah. If you're following rabbinical Judaism, you do not keep the Torah. You keep a derivative religion. You're like a Muslim or you're like a Christian. You're not keeping Torah. You're keeping some bizarre derivative religion. And again, I'm even reluctant to include Islam in that because Islam is actually much closer to the Torah than Christianity and rabbinical Judaism are. You're keeping some distorted derivative religion invented in the 2nd century, thereabouts BCE, by Hellenist and Roman and Persian influenced rabbis, or Pharisees, later rabbis. At any rate, then I will do this to you. What if qadti alechem behala? I will visit upon you, and I hate that translation, but I'll leave it there for now. Okay, here they translate as bring upon you. Behala. So now we're going to get a lot of words which are also going to be not 100% what they all mean. So behala in modern Hebrew, behala means horror or terror. Here they translate as sudden terror, not southern terror. I knew someone from Texas who maybe would be called Southern Terror, but this is sudden terror. Okay, a direct panic against you. That's the way he translates it. Okay. If kaddi, they often translate it as visit upon or recompense upon. If kaddi, really the idea, actually, there's this word here, pakad, the underlying root is pe kuf daled, pakad. And it's usually translated as visit, revisit, recompense, something like that. What it really means is, as I always explain to my various students, whether we're doing the public studies or if we're doing one-on-one studies, pakad, the idea of pakad means that Yahweh or somebody waits to the right time and then does something, remembers. It could either be for good or it can be for bad, or pays back either good or bad. Right? It's almost like there's an element of the right timing in it all. Okay, right? So you've disobeyed my covenant, and when that right time comes, that I feel like I've given you all the chances, and now the timing is just right for whatever reason, then I will wreak upon you. Wreak is the wrong word. I will rain down upon you terror. Okay? Et hashachefet or et hakadachet. Let's just translate that. So wasting diseases and fever, the NIV translates it as consumption and fever. Then we have a whole bunch of diseases, basically. So shachefet, kadachat. We could sit here and analyze what each one means, and we could look up the roots, but I'm not gonna do that right now. Let's look up one just for my own edification. Right. Michalot einayim, so maybe dimness or blindness of eyes. Midivot nafesh, so maybe reduction of strength, or let's see how Robert Alter translates it here. They translate sap your strength, destroy your sight, and sap your strength. Again, there's going to be a lot of different translations here because the language is a bit esoteric. The Hebrew is esoteric here. Okay, wasting the eyes and making the throat ache. He's taking nafesh very literally. Oh, okay, I see what he's doing. Midivot. Just want to look this up for myself. Yeah, so it only appears once. So this is what we call a hapax legomenon. There's only one occurrence in the entire Tanakh. And that means nobody really knows what it means. Unless there are other places where there's something similar. Anyway, I'm not going to analyze it now. Let's get a little commentary on that. So that's verse 16. Well, let's go to the end. Zaratem larik, zarachem, ve'achalu oivechem. You will plant seeds for no reason, or you'll plant seeds into emptiness. Here they translate in vain. Yeah, that's a good translation. You'll plant seeds in vain. You'll plant your seeds in vain. Your enemies will eat them. In other words, will eat the produce. Okay. Robert Alter on that. Oh, and we could bring up Everett Fox here as well. So Everett Fox for change. Let me bring him up. This is Leviticus chapter 26, verse 16. Just give me a second here. So we don't always have to rely on Robert Alter. This is also an excellent translation. And a little bit further. Okay, getting close. Right. So this is Everett Fox, also an excellent translator. So I in turn will do this to you. I will mete out to you shock, consumption and fever, wearing out the eyes and exhausting the breath. He also translates that as he translates it a little bit differently. At any rate, you will sow your seed for naught, for your enemies will eat it. Okay. All right, let's see if we can get any commentary here. Down. So in verse 15, voiding the covenant, the antithesis to God's fulfilling the covenant, verse 9, right? So if you break my covenant, in verse 9, it says this is part of the blessing. I will make you fruitful. I will turn towards you. I'll turn my face towards you, essentially. And I will make you fruitful and I will multiply you. And I will establish, or I will uphold my covenant with you. So that's the antithesis here, right? If you break my covenant that I upheld with you because you were following me, then all these bad things will happen. Okay, that's what Robert Alter's saying. Make the throat ache. So yeah, he's going to explain again without getting into technical details. Nefesh, this word in Hebrew, nefesh, which appears right here, can mean a lot of different things. It's multivalent, as they like to say. It has many different values. And most often, it means a person. But when speaking about a specific body part, it means the throat or the neck. And here, what he's saying is because it speaks about the weakening or the blindness of the eyes, here it's speaking about another body part, and he's going to say that that's meant to be literally the throat. Okay, making the throat ache. Since a particular body part seems required to match the wasted eyes, it is highly likely that the sense here of nefesh is once again throat. Okay. I'll set my face against you. That's what we're up to here. Verse 17. ונתתי פניי בכם וניגפתם לפני אויביכם. And I will set my face against you. Okay, and we saw earlier, it was at verse 9, I will turn towards you. In the blessing part, paniti alechem, I will turn my face towards you. Paniti alechem. Here we have in the Hebrew, tati matai bechem, I will place my face against you, or upon you. Against you is really the implication here. V'nigaftem lifnei oivechem, and you will be struck down before your enemies. V'radu, and those that hate you will rule over you. V'nastem, v'ein rodefetchem, and you will flee even though no one is chasing you. Pretty serious, right? I will set my face against you so that you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over, and you will flee even when no one is pursuing you. You'll flee even if no one's pursuing you. You'll be freaked out, right? They're going to mess with our minds, right? We're going to live in such a state of fear that at the drop of a leaf, we're going to think our enemies are there and we're going to start running away. Kind of sounds like Nazi Germany or something like that. Like, you know, it's kind of... Okay. Robert Alter on that one. I'll set my face against you. So he's saying what we just said. This is the antithesis of I should turn towards you in verse 9. Throughout the section of curses, the translation uses will in the first person and shall in the second, because the modal force of the language seems more emphatic in the curses than in the blessings. Let me pick apart what he's trying to say here. Okay. Let me just see something here. I'm not sure exactly the point he's trying to make, but maybe it'll become clear. At any rate, it doesn't matter. Right. Verse 18. Be'im ad ele lo tishma'u li, and if up until now, or even if after all of these things, you don't listen to me, you still don't listen to me, v'yasafti li yasra etchem, then I will increase the punishments upon you. I will increase my affliction of you. Sheva al chatotechem, 7 times for your sins. Okay, Everett Fox on that one. Now, If after all that you do not hearken to me, I will continue to discipline you sevenfold for your sins. Excellent translation. Everett Fox is an excellent translation. Verse 19. ושברתי את גאון עוזכם, ונתתי את שמכם כברזל ואת ארצכם כנחושה, and I will break the pride of your strength. Let me just translate and I'll give the commentary on it. ונתתי את שמכם כברזל, I will make your skies like iron, ואת ארצכם כנחושה, and your earth like bronze. So I will break Gaon Uzchem. I will break the pride of your strength. In other words, you have the pride of your strength. You have pride in your strength, right? Maybe one second, I'm sorry, I heard noise in the background. Gaon Uzchem, right? So you have pride, you think your strength is going to save you, or you have pride in your strength, and I'll break that. Okay, and I will make your sky like iron, and your earth, your land like bronze. In other words, there's not going to be any rain coming from above, right? Barzel, either because of the color of iron, right? Can you imagine that color in the sky? It's not blue with rain coming down, or cloudy with lots of rain coming down. It's basically, it's basically brownish, right? Dry. And your land like bronze, right? The same for the land. Or the implication is that it's all closed up, it's solid. There's nothing coming out of the sky, there's nothing coming out of the land. Okay, let's see if we have a little commentary on that one from Robert Alter. The Grimm simile. This Grimm simile is a common feature in Assyrian treaty curses and is equally exploited in Deuteronomy 28:23. Although in that instance, bronze goes with the heavens and iron with the earth. So Deuteronomy 28 is a rehashing. That's right at the end. That's Moses' last speech, and it's essentially a rehashing at that point of the blessing and the curse. We'll get to it when we get to Deuteronomy 28. Anything else to be said about that? I'm not really sure. I guess that kind of covers it. Verse 20, with them, Tarik, Kochachem, V'lo titen artzachem et yivulah, Wa'et ha'aretz lo yitin pirio. And you will finish off, you will use up all of your strength for nothing, in vain. V'lo titen artzachem et yivulah, and your land shall not bring forth its produce. Wa'et ha'aretz lo yitin pirio, and the trees of the land will not give their fruit. Okay, this is actually the singular. The tree of the land will not give its fruit, but it's the abstract singular. It means in general, the trees of the land will not give their fruit. That's verse 20. Okay, NIV translates, your strength will be spent in vain because your soil will not yield its crops, nor will the trees of your land yield their fruit. Any comment there? None? We'll go a couple more verses and then we're going to stop. Verse 21. Wa'im tirchu ayimi qari v'lo tovu ishma li. Translate up until there. There's our semicolon, our nach. And if you come at me, kind of colloquially translating it, it literally means go with me. Keri is usually translated like deliberately. And you still do not wish or love desire to listen to me, then I will increase, or I will add upon you a punishment sevenfold for your sin. So another sevenfold, right? Earlier we had the sevenfold. Where was that? Right, in verse 18. Okay, I will afflict you sevenfold for your sins, and now another sevenfold. Okay, I'll afflict you sevenfold. Right, so first you're going to get these diseases. I afflict you sevenfold. Now your strength is going to be broken. Right, the illusion of your strength is going to be broken. The pride of your strength. Your skies and your earth are going to be shut up like iron and bronze, and you're not going to have any produce or any fruits. And if you still go at me, okay, Keri, I want to see how Everett Fox translates that. Walk with me in opposition and do not consent. So he says, walk with me in opposition. Robert Alter, that's 21, translates it as, if you come in encounter against me. So, yeah, Keri is usually, that's also kind of a difficult one to translate for many translators. Hostility, opposition, contrariness. And it seems only to appear, yeah, it only appears in Leviticus 26. And it appears 7 times. The BDB, Brown Driver Briggs, opposition, contrariness. This topical lexicon. Keri only appears in Leviticus 26. The term is rendered as hostility or contrary. It describes first Israel's stubborn posture towards the Lord, towards Yahweh, and then his measured but decisive response in kind. That's all the implication. That's all the information that's relevant we get there. Right, so they related to kara. And Everett Fox Robert Alter picks up on that. Come in encounter against me. Okay, imikeri. Yeah, they used to translate this. The typical translation we used to hear is deliberately. Again, let me just check something. My own notification. Yeah, okay, here we go. Robert Alter does have something to say about this. The exact origin of this phrase, unique to this passage, telchu im mi bakeri, is in dispute. Right? That's why we're getting all these different translations. Though it obviously means something like confront, dispute, rebel against. The most plausible etymology of keri is from the verbal stem kara, or kuf reish he, suggesting encounter, happening upon, or even mishap in modern Hebrew. And in biblical Hebrew, there's the word mikre, which means a mishap, really, in modern Hebrew, or a coincidence. Mikre, or a happening. So this translation uses the phrase in encounter, which of course can mean duel, preserving what may be a slight idiomatic oddness in Hebrew. Okay, fair enough. I think maybe, should we stop? We'll do a couple. It's already pretty late here. I think we're going to stop. I'll do this last verse. I'll do this verse and the next verse. So if you still don't want to listen to me, via safti alechem, so I will increase. I will increase upon you my punishments sevenfold. So now we're up to 7 and another 7, so 49. Right? You see how the Torah likes to work in sevens, 49. And I'm not saying that this is a coincidence here or this is on purpose. There's no deeper meaning here, but I'm just pointing out, remember the number of days that we count between the bringing of the Omer offering and Shavuot is 7 sevens. 7 times 7, 7 weeks. Each week has 7 days. Anyway, I'm not saying there's a connection there. I'm just pointing out that the Torah often, as we know, works. There are a lot of sevens appear. Let's put it that way. Mishlachti b'chem et chayat hasadeh v'shikla etchem v'ichrita et behemtechem v'amita etchem v'neshamu datchem. Okay, let's translate this. I will send out upon you. I will send upon you. I will release upon you et chayat hasadeh, the wild animals, literally the animal of the field. What it means, the wild animals. We spoke about the wild animals, right? Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! V'shiklatchem, and they will bereave you. In other words, they'll kill off your family members, and you'll mourn them. V'ichrita et behemtechem, and they will destroy or they will kill your domesticated animals. Behemtechem is your domesticated animals. V'amita etchem, and they will reduce your number. They will reduce your numbers. V'nashamu darchechem, and your roads will become abandoned or desolate. Right? So we have here an image of wild animals proliferating in the land of Israel, killing people off. Right? There's going to be a proliferation, an infestation of lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Right? I will send wild animals against you. They will rob you of your children, destroy your cattle, and make you so few in number that your roads will be desolated. Robert Alteron. Let's go to Everett Fox on that one, actually. Okay, I will send loose against you the wild beasts of the field so that they bereave you, so that they utterly cut off your animals, and so that make you few, and your roads become desolate. Robert Alter. Okay, I will unleash. I like his translations. That's great. Unleash is a perfect word to use. I will unleash the beasts of the field among you, and they shall bereave you of your children, and cut off your cattle, and diminish you, and your roads will be desolate. And his commentary on that, your roads will be desolate. If one pauses to reflect, this is a haunting image, and one to which several of the prophets revert. The once teeming highways of the land will be bleak and empty after the devastation of the populace. Okay. Last verse. No, we're going to stop there. So we got down to 22. Let me just make a mark. Let me just make a note for myself that we're starting next time in 23. '26, 23. Okay, very good. All right, people. So we're going to wrap it up there. Hope you've enjoyed the study. Any questions, any comments before we go? Shabbat Shalom, Christian. Any questions, any comments before we wrap it up for today? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Well, in that case, I thank you all for joining us for this World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. Hope to see you guys again next week. Again, I've made all the announcements. I don't need to do them again at any length, but there's the QR code for joining our community. If instead you'd like to give a donation to the World Alliance of Qara'im, I'm going to put that QR code up right now. That's the QR code for donation. And if you look at the original announcement, you'll see where you can join our WhatsApp group, our WhatsApp announcements group. We also have a special group open to members who join the WAC, World Alliance of Qara'im. There's the link again. And I hope you enjoyed the study. If you want private Hebrew lessons or private Torah lessons or private biblically based life coaching is also something I like to do and I've been doing for a while, then contact me and we can get that going. And that's about all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the study. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, wherever you are in the world. Yeah, you mentioned Hadassah. How is your mom doing? So let's all take a second to pray to Yahweh for the recovery and the health of Hadassah's 92-year-old mom. She's mentioned it now a number of weeks that her mom is in the hospital. Okay. So we pray to Yahweh. Like I speak for everybody when I say we pray to Yahweh, that he should look after your mother and heal her and bring her back home and make her well. Amen. Okay, everybody. So we're going to end it here. Hope you enjoyed the study. And yeah, falling, as we all know, all of us who have elderly parents, we all know that falling is a huge issue with older people. And yep, they can just rip things right open and then it takes a long time to heal. That's absolutely true. At least it doesn't seem like it's life-threatening, thank God. But we pray. I can speak for everybody, as I said. We pray to Yahweh that she should be healed quickly and fully. Okay, everyone. Have a Shabbat Shalom. Have a Shavua Tov. And we'll see you again next week. We'll go out with music, as we usually do. And I thank you for joining me.